Welcome to the Voodoo Power Podcast.
Welcome to Plates and Pancakes. We're sitting down today with Justin Harris. Justin is the owner of Troponin Nutrition. He specializes in customized training and performance nutrition. He works with top bodybuilders and powerlifters to take their physique and strength to the next level. Justin has a master's degree in atomic physics and an undergraduate in kinesiology and an exercise science degree. On top of an exceptional academic resume, he was a 2004 Mr. Michigan Super Heavyweight Champion for the 2006 Junior USAs. He was a 2007 and 2008 APF Michigan Powerlifting Champion, totaling elite both years. Justin has published 2 books, along with multiple comprehensive ebooks that can be found on his website, troponinnutrition.com. Welcome to the show, Justin.
Thanks for having me.
Now, I've listened to so many of your podcasts and your information you have out there, and it's all geared towards bodybuilders, powerlifters, but your knowledge isn't limited to that. So maybe we can spin this in a little bit different direction, and let's talk about some arena athletes, football, wrestling.
Okay.
Now, you were a Division III, 2-time All-American?
Yes, yep. Mm-hmm. Defensive end, kind of outside linebacker, played fullback a little bit too.
So you were kind of everywhere.
I mean, I was fast for how fat I was. So, they kind of used me in interesting positions.
Knowing what you know now, what advice nutritionally would you go back and give the 20-year-old you?
I wasn't terrible, but I was obsessed with eating too much, probably. I mean, I'm undersized. I'm 5'11", playing, a position where hardly anyone's under 6'3" or 6'4". When I went to the NFL Combines in 2001, and I measured out prorated on every stat, ran a 4.68. I did 40 or 41 reps with 225. My shuttle run was very good. I had 36.5-inch vertical, but I was 5'10.6", and so I was always and prorated for height was like 6'4" or something for a defensive end. So I was always like kind of worried that I was undersized, and so I probably carried more body fat than I needed. I ran a 4.68 was my best 40, which is, really good, especially for Division III at defensive end. But I really think if I was probably, I played at like 260, I think, 245 with 15 pounds less fat would probably did me better. But I was really worried about being undersized. So if I could go back, it would be that. And then, I mean, it was college. So, I had some beers. And I wasn't quite into my obsession with bodybuilding or nutrition didn't really start until football ended. I mean, I was interested in it, but I was interested in weightlifting, training, and the nutrition was just really to kind of feed that. And I didn't care much more about it than that. But once football was over and I no longer had that 40 hours a week of, running and practice, and, my weight started climbing even faster. And that's when I really got into it. But if I could go back, it would be eat cleaner, not be so obsessed with the weight so much, but it really didn't do too much wrong. But there is a big difference in between eating for performance and eating for physique. And it's kind of the settings are switched, I guess. If you're eating, like if you're a bodybuilder, you want to have a good workout, but how you perform in the gym isn't really that tightly correlated with your progress. You can have a pretty crappy workout, and if everything else is in line, your nutrition, your supplements, you can still make progress. And so for bodybuilding, you want to eat to recover from the training. So like with my diets, we do high carb days. Those really big high carb days would come on the day on the body part day you wanted to bring up, so you're eating all around that day. But for performance, like for football, it's the opposite, because you don't want the high carbs on the day you're competing, because you're going to be sluggish. Your insulin levels are going to be elevated. Insulin's a mild central nervous system depressant. It's a mild diuretic. So you don't want that. You want all those carbs that, in the days before. And so, and I've done too many podcasts to remember which ones I've said what on, but I've probably said this a dozen times, but I'll say it again. And a kind of an analogy would be, like if I was doing cardio to burn fat, I would not want to eat while I was doing cardio, so I wouldn't want to drink any juice or have any carbs because I'm trying to burn fat. But if I was competing in a marathon or a running event, it would be the opposite, because I want to improve my performance, not the way I look. And so I would have the carbs with it. And so, and I kind of didn't kind of skirted around the answer, I guess, but that would be that's the big thing with performance, is that and bodybuilders don't get this. They think it's the opposite too. But for performance, you eat before. If you have a Saturday game, your big day should be Friday. You're playing on the carbs you ate Thursday and Friday on Saturday. But so bodybuilders always think the same thing, that you're going to want to eat before so you have a really good workout. And that's good to have a good workout, but the quality of the workout is way less correlated with your progress on how your physique looks as the food you eat after the workout. So for bodybuilding, it's the other way around. You would eat really after the training.
Or athletes, would you stay more at like an isocaloric diet, or would you have them cycle also? Would you be trying to build a metabolism like you do in your powerlifters and your bodybuilders?
Always cycling. And the reason is because we're bound by thermodynamics, meaning if I burn 2,000 calories in a day or whatever, if I eat 2,200 calories, I'm going to store 200 of those calories. If I eat 1,800 calories, I'm going to lose 200 stored calories from my body. And so that's pretty simple, straightforward, calories in, calories out. But we don't just store calories in one way. We store them in three ways. We have muscle, which, protein gets stored as muscle. There's not much room to store that. It's probably on the order of about 25 grams of new muscle protein synthesis per day that you can maintain long term. And even that you really can't, because that averages out to 20 pounds of new muscle over a year, or 200 pounds every 10 years. So the protein storage capability is very low, a handful of grams per day. So then it comes down to carbs and fat. And there's a limit with carbs. Someone my size might be able to store about 1,000. A really big bodybuilder, maybe 1,200 grams of carbs. The average American, about 800 grams of glycogen, and then almost an unlimited amount of fat. Obviously, we've seen, you can walk around anywhere in America, especially Michigan, and so you're bound by that. But so if you eat 200 calories more than you burn, you're going to store them. But there's ways you can trick the system. So if I were going to, like, if I have on the day I compete, I'm probably in a calorie deficit. Even if I try to eat a lot, especially with football, the games are long. If coach usually has you eat, if you have a Saturday game in college, coach usually has you eat at like 7 a.m. and you play at 1. They're terrible about that. And so you're not eating that whole time, and then you're not going to eat until after the game until like 6. So you're burning all those calories off. So you're depleted, which is fine because you've fueled up before that. But that actually allows you the benefit of then eating more than you burn. So let's say we deplete 1,000 calories on game day. That gives us 1,000 extra calories that we can play with now. Now, if we eat 1,000 extra calories from poor food choices, we might store that as fat. But because we're depleted in glycogen, because glycolysis is the primary energy source we're going to use for football, we can eat that surplus in carb sources, very high carb intake. And we will store those extra calories. If we burn 2,000 calories the next day, but we eat 2,500 or 3,000 calories, we'll store 1,000 calories. But if they come from carbohydrates while we're in a glycogen depleted state, we're going to preferentially store those carbs as glycogen rather than body fat. So it's a kind of a way to trick the system. So the cycling always is a way to trick the system and kind of cheat thermodynamics. And the reason is if it was just calories and calories, we only stored calories in one form, then there'd be really much less need for cycling, because there isn't a benefit for depleting. Any day you're hypocaloric, you burn those calories. Any day you're hypercaloric, you store those calories. But because we store them in different forms, we can create a state where when we're hypocaloric, we're burning some of those calories from glycogen and some of them from fat. And then if we, on the days we're hypercaloric, if we do it such that we, very high carbohydrate, then those calories are going to be stored as glycogen, and we won't regain the fat back. And and it's a small difference, it's because it's not like magic, but 10, 20, 25, 50 grams each time you do that every week, of that change in body composition. Over time, you're going to, if you're dropping, 100 grams of 100 calories of fat each week, over every 35 weeks, that's a pound of fat difference, and so even if you're not doing anything to change your body weight, you're not actually, your net caloric balance over the course of the week is the same. If you do that nice manipulation, then you can slowly burn fat and slowly build new muscle under the same caloric boundaries over any week time frame. And so that absolutely, because we store calories 3 different ways, cycling those calories to manipulate them is always going to be the most efficient.
Now, you played Division III, so you probably understand this. I mean, if you're not Division I, if you're not in the NFL, you don't have that nutritionist. You don't have a department there to make sure you're getting all the foods you need. So what advice would you have for younger athletes, high school athletes, smaller college athletes that have to find a way to get the food in, and what can they do that will easily help them boost their calories and still keep it somewhat clean?
Pick it, kill it, grow it. It's kind of my mantra. That if you can't pick it from a tree, grow it in a garden, or hunt it for meat, you shouldn't be eating it. And that's really our bodies are almost really self-regulated in that if you just focus on those foods, you're not going to be obese. You're not going to be out of because our bodies are optimally anabolic and kind of optimally hormonally for men in like the 8 to 12% body fat range. And so if we eat foods our body was really intended to digest, with the nutrient density that we were intended to have them in, like apple juice, you can drink 100 grams of sugar from apple juice, but a Granny Smith apple is like 15 grams of carbs. So eating 100 grams of sugar from apples takes a lot more effort. We bypass all these things from the way for 200,000 years our bodies utilize food. Your natural hunger levels are going to be such that if you eat foods we're meant to eat, pick it, kill it, grow it, you're very likely going to stay in about the 8 to 12% body fat range, where you're most hormonally optimal, most anabolic, most athletic.
Yeah, and that seems to be the thing. Kids are grabbing whatever food they can get their hands on just to not be hungry. So I guess more planning on the athlete's role or on the athlete's part will help.
And it's difficult when you're eating in the cafeteria at college, because you don't have many choices. And certainly the foods they prepare you are not going to be healthy food sources. They're just not. But there's always the deli meat section. And you could argue that nitrates aren't good or that deli meat's processed, and it's probably not as good as eating like a turkey you killed yourself. But turkey meat is very low fat. And there's always a bagel section. There's always oatmeal. There's always that big tub of oatmeal that no one ever eats. That's really, you don't even have to count calories. You should go in every time you eat. You should have a protein source, a lean protein source, chicken, turkey, some red meats like flank steak. You should have a complex carbohydrate source. Rice is my favorite because there's very few rice allergies. It's pretty calorie dense. Potatoes, oatmeal, and then depending on your natural body fat levels and natural appetite, a healthy fat source like peanut butter, avocado, guacamole, or macadamia nut oil or things like that. And that's really, if you just go in and every time you eat, you pick one of from each of those food sources, you really can't go wrong. Your appetite will kind of tell you how much to eat, how much it needs to repair from the activities you've done, and how much you need to stay in kind of that optimal range. And why that's so important as an athlete is because when you get above, as a male, you get above about 12% of body fat, two things happen. One, your production of testosterone decreases, which no one's going to want. And then two, your aromatization of that testosterone to estrogen increases. And I've said this before too, and it's easy to picture because everyone's had an overweight friend when you were maybe in your 20s. Obviously you'd gone through puberty, but they don't have a very full beard. They kind of have like a neck beard, not much chest hair, kind of like boobs, man boobs. And that the reason is because through puberty, when their testosterone production should have been highest, and it was highest, it was blunted because of their body fat. And then on top of that, their estrogen levels were increased. And so your body doesn't want that. Your body will naturally kind of stay in that optimally hormonal range if you just eat foods we're meant to eat.
So as an athlete, as the season's going on, you're building your resting metabolic rate. On top of that, you're burning calories, which might put you in a double deficit. So as the season goes on, are you looking to build in more calories to keep you where you want to be?
Kind of two things happen. A lot of times, actually, what happens is your metabolic rate will decrease over the season because people actually tend to lose muscle mass. And I think it's getting better now with the strength and conditioning coaches I work with. They're much better with in-season training. But for a long time, it was almost like a fear of being too tired from your weight training, and weight training levels will really drop off during the season. And, like if you have muscle mass your body doesn't want, which is what happens when you weight train heavily for a sport, and then you do really high high impact cardio, which is what sports are, with no weight training, you'll drop strength pretty quickly. And I remember seeing that in college all the time, and actually arguing with our coaches, because I would train hard all year and they would get angry with me, because they'd say I'd be too tired for the game. And yes, I would be sore sometimes for the game. But my thinking was I might be 95% for game one, and I might be 95% for game 13 also. But my 95% on the 13th game, meaning I'm actually stronger than I was at the start of the season when everyone else was weaker, their 100% is continually decreasing. My 95% is continually increasing. And that would play out every year. My stats increase across the season, and my best games are always late in the year when everyone else is losing their strength. But yeah, so if in that case, yes, because when you are adding muscle and still training, you're always looking to increase food, because that's really all adding muscle is. It's really just a two-step process. Like it's like we have all these books, all these magazines, this whole industry devoted to like all these supplements. And I have a supplement company, and supplements do help, but they're there to supplement the main things, which are food and training. And so you have to think, how do we build muscle? It's, the weight training doesn't build any muscle. It can't. Muscle is made of proteins. The weight training creates a stimulus so that if you eat the proper foods, then the stimulus can actually synthesize new muscle proteins. And so what you really want to do to maximize that is try to get as much good, clean food passing through the body every day as possible. And so and that's really all it is. Step one in adding muscle and becoming bigger and stronger is continually teach the body to eat more good, clean, pick it, kill it, grow it foods without getting fat. That's the key one, because we have to stay under that 12% body fat to be optimally hormonal, and then get really strong in the gym. And so if you're doing that, then yes, all season long, you should be continually, and a college student's not going to be this meticulous with their diet. Most of them aren't, but you should be pretty, continually trying to add more food, trying to add more good food. And the nice thing is, when you're adding muscle, your body sends signals that you're hungry. Like when I see people online talking about force feeding in the off season, I always just shake my head, because you should never force feed. Because one, that kills your appetite. Because like you might think, like, I don't care, I'll do whatever it takes to win. I'll do whatever. I'm going to make the NFL. I'll do whatever it takes. That's great, but you're not going to force feed chicken and rice for 15 years. You just hate, your body starts to reject it. Your appetite decreases because your body doesn't want to do it. It knows it's getting out of that optimally hormonal body fat range. However, if you stay like just a touch below what your true appetite is, where you're eating, but every meal you could eat a little bit more, and then you're adding muscle and you're training, and so your appetite goes up a little bit and your food goes up a little bit. But if it always stays a little bit below that, then you're going to get that constant proper signaling of the hunger hormones. It gives signaling that you want to eat more, and then you're not as full as you are when you do. And you can, on teamtroponin.com, we have a case study of showing just how crazy you can get with someone's metabolism when you are super, super, super meticulous with it. So you can imagine, if you're eating 2,000 calories of good food right now, say you're a freshman eating 2,000 calories of good food at 11% body fat, and in 4 years you're a senior eating 4,000 calories of clean food at 11% body fat, twice as much food at the same body fat. There's no case that can happen where you're not bigger, stronger, and faster.
Let's move into weight-dependent sports. Adjusting glycogen, meet days. What are some protocols that are relatively safe that an athlete could get away with and still be able to refeed and maintain performance?
Relatively safe. How important is the safety? Because you can do some amazing things. I have in my second comprehensive performance nutrition, I think I do. Or meant to. Is it?
It's in the second one.
Yeah, you can, and I've done this many times. Matt Krozaleski dropped 40 pounds to make 220 for his all-time world record total at 220. He was 260, dropped 40 pounds, and within 24 hours he was 260 again. So you can do some really dramatic things, and that sounds crazy, but you have to, everyone knows our bodies are 70% water. So if you're 260, 70% of that is technically weight that can be lost. Things, the more of it you lose, the more issues you have, electrolyte imbalance, blood pressure levels start dropping. But you can really make dramatic changes in body weight, dramatic swings in body weight. And that's actually why in sports with weight class, carb cycling is even more effective, because the weird thing is and we kind of talked about this at the beginning, there's the difference between eating for performance and eating for strength or for appearance, and all you have to do is look at like a Daniel Cormier or a Tyson Fury to understand that, you don't have to look amazing to be an amazing athlete, and so they are two very different things. But if you're bound by a weight class, you almost have no choice but to be very lean, very low body fat to be optimal at that weight class. And so the that's where carb cycling becomes even more important, because that's the only way you can really manipulate things. Because if like if we have to make weight, if we have someone, you can run the numbers. If you say, I don't know, a 181-pound wrestler, and say he stores 1,000 grams of glycogen, 7 grams of carbs is glycogen. 1,000 grams is that's a pound, 2.2 pounds, right? So that's 2.2 pounds there. Well, 4 to 4.5 times the amount of glucose gets stored as glycogen as water. So you have 4 times that. So now we have 8 more pounds. Now that's 10 pounds. It's really about 11 pounds, and you do 4.5. So we have 11 pounds just in glucose that can store in the muscles that we can deplete. So, and then you can easily teach the body to drink 8 liters of water a day, about 2 gallons of water per day. That's 16 pounds of water. And you're peeing it out every day, obviously, because you're not, eventually you'll drink 2 gallons at first and you'll bloat up a little bit, but you do that for 2 weeks in a row, you'll flush all that water and your weight stays stable. Well, now if you remove those 2 gallons, that's 16 more pounds of weight you can lose just from that your body's used to flushing out. It won't be the full 16 pounds because antidiuretic hormone will kick in pretty quick, but it'll be about 12 pounds. So right there, we're at 23 pounds between the glycogen and the water. And then we have another thing, sodium. So our blood has to stay at 0.9% sodium. And so if we deplete sodium, if we go low sodium on a diet for a day or two before we have to make weight, and our blood sodium concentration gets to 0.8 or 0.7, the body it needs it at 0.9. So the only way it can increase the concentration of sodium is to decrease the amount of water. If you have a water and sodium jug and it's not enough sodium in there, you can add more sodium to increase the concentration, or you can flush the water out to increase the sodium concentration. And that's what it'll do. So you lower sodium, you can get another 5, 6, or even 10 pounds out of that. And so right there, just from that, we have 30 pounds of body weight where you've done nothing to body fat, nothing to true body composition, just manipulating the things that can be manipulated in days. And then even better, because you've reduced all those things, the body senses that. And so when you get depleted in water, your body pumps out, changes antidiuretic hormone, vasopressin, and will then hold water more easily. So after you make weight, you can restore that water even easier because your body's trying to hold it. Same with sodium. So your body's holding all that water, so that's naturally going to deplete your blood sodium levels. So when you add sodium back in, all that sodium is going to stay in the body because it's going to keep climbing as your water concentration increases. And then the glycogen is super easy because just eat a bunch of carbs. And so it's like you have to really, you can do so what we just did was no sauna, no diuretics, no riding a bike in a sweatsuit, and those things sometimes are needed, but the old school approach of going to that right out of the gate to sweat the water out is really so crude, because you're basically doing the same mechanisms through the worst effect possible, because you're not changing sodium naturally. So there's no desire for your body to flush water. You are decreasing water, but when you decrease water intake, what's that do? That increases the sodium concentration of your blood. So your body's really not trying to lose water. So antidiuretic hormone kicks right in. So all the things like the sauna and things like that work, but anyone who's done it knows it very quickly stops working. The first 20 minutes in the sauna, you flush a lot of water. The next 20 minutes, not so much. Pretty soon you're sitting in 20 minutes and nothing's happening. And why? Because you fought the body. You don't have to. The body will win. It's got 4 billion years of evolution across from when we were, a single-celled organism. It's got pretty good safety measures in to fight you against those things. So if you just let the body do what it does and manipulate those things properly, like know what blood sodium concentration is, know what fluid intake is, you can get rapid weight drops, very safe, without raising your body temperature, no sauna work, no exercise while you're dehydrated. And then even better when you do it that way. When you've depleted those things, your body then wants to restore all those things. And so filling back out is even easier.
Yeah. So when you come back into the refeed, your body's going to take it all in.
Yeah, it wants to. It's got every hormone it has been adjusted to maximally absorb everything you're eating. Where if you flush everything out through sauna and training and sweatsuits, you've done nothing to those hormones. You've brute forced it out. And so to add them back in, you got to brute force it all back in, which is hard.
Okay. So say you weighed in, you made the weight you wanted to make, you're in a depleted state. I know your protocol from your book. I mean, I've used it. It worked better than anything I've ever tried. So would you be coming back in trying to hit a high molecular carbohydrate, throwing some little bit of salt in there, some creatine, trying to get it up flush?
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. And why the high molecular weight carbohydrate? What that is it's really not, it just means it's big. Like you have glucose molecules, a single molecule. Well, now you have a string of glucose molecules. That's maltodextrin. The way that we absorb glucose in the body is it goes into the small intestine. We can only absorb simple sugars. So any complex carbohydrate has to pull the simple sugars off. So if you have maltodextrin and you have a string like this, it can pluck one off this side, one off this side, one off this side until it gets through the whole chain. But that's not very much. High molecular weight, like a highly branched cyclodextrin, is this huge complex of glucose clusters with all this surface area and all these glucose molecules all at the surface that can be plucked off. And so it's got two things. The really high molecular weight means it's not going to sit in your stomach. It's going to have a low osmolarity. And why is that important? Because if you're depleted, and people I'm sure everyone's done this. If you're dehydrated and you make weight and you start chugging Gatorade, what happens? Your stomach bloats out. Why? Because the pull goes to those electrolytes in the Gatorade, but because the Gatorade is a low molecular weight, there's nothing. It's not like there's nothing pulling it through the system, through the stomach. So it's just sitting there in the stomach, and the body senses all that sodium, all that water is going in there, and so you just bloat up, and that's the worst thing because now your stomach's full, you can't eat, and you haven't none of that glucose has gotten to the blood to where it can actually go to the muscles yet. Where a high molecular weight carbohydrate is very heavy, high molecular weight, it's a heavy weight basically, and it's like a bowling ball, goes right into the small intestine, so it doesn't sit in your stomach. Now it's in the small intestine where we want the water transfer to occur. And so it'll go in the small intestine, transfer that, all this huge cluster of glucose molecules get plucked off, which gives you two benefits. One, immediate carbohydrate restoration, because right away you got all these molecules. And two, it lasts a long time because it's like an everlasting gobstopper, with a huge surface area. It takes forever to get down right out. As soon as it gets in your small intestine, that glucose is getting all across the small intestine of the bloodstream, but it takes forever to get all the way down. And it all happens in the small intestine rather than your stomach. And so then you could even do additional things, like you can add creatine to it. And with cyclodextrins, they're like a conic structure. And so our field rations is made with beta cyclodextrins. It's a 7-ring. So it's like a cone, like a traffic cone. And why is that important? Well, it's hydrophobic on one side, hydrophilic on the other. And so when things will get sucked in and trapped in there, it stays in there until it gets reversed by water, which will happen in the small intestine again, which is what we want. And so that'll pull the creatine, it'll pull amino acids, it'll pull the sodium through the stomach with it. And so it's like, it's almost like magic if you've used it, because like watching people carb up on like Gatorade or something, and miserable and bloated, and they're like burping up Gatorade. Where the only problem with the high molecular weight carbohydrates is that whole process can happen too fast, and you get something called dumping syndrome, which is too much water gets flushed into the colon and you have to dump it. And so, but if you're smart, there's a way to mitigate that. Like with our field rations, we had a little bit of pure glucose to lower the molecular weight just enough to get us out of the dumping syndrome range.
All right. So is that why, like in your book, you talked about diluting Gatorade or running G2 to kind of keep that from happening?
Yeah. And so because that was originally written before, obviously before we had field rations, but really even before high molecular weight carbohydrates were a big thing. And so the original Gatorade was very different formulation than it is now. It was made by the Florida Gators sports science department in the 1960s. That's why it's called Gatorade. And the original Gatorade was made with glucose, not like the high fructose corn syrup they have now. And it was pretty low carbohydrate, because what they did was they studied athletes to find how much carbohydrates they could intake at any given period of time without getting an insulin increase. And they didn't have these fancy carbohydrates, so they just had to use glucose. which is tough because glucose is, one molecule gets in small intestine, gets in the blood, insulin increases. You can't have very much because insulin will spike pretty quickly. And so they found, because you don't want insulin spike because it's a central nervous system depressant, it's a diuretic, it's all the things you don't want when you're trying to fill out. And so, or play sports. And so it was pretty low carbohydrate. I think it was like 8 grams, 7 or 8 grams per serving, where now like the regular Gatorades, I don't know, way more than that. And then it had quite a bit more sodium. And so, but that works when you're an athlete and all you care about is replenishing. But when they market it to the general public and you have a diluted juice that tastes like sort of like juice, but really diluted and real salty, it doesn't work. And so they made it something that would taste good, lower the sodium, increase the sugar, but kind of ruined all the benefits of it. Where again, with the high molecular weight carbohydrate, you can take much more carbohydrates. And when we're talking about like filling out after making weight, it's different than during a game, but the same principles hold. Because the cluster is so huge, it's actually a very complex carbohydrate, not a sugar. So it does not spike insulin. Like if you took a blood sugar graph and you took glucose, you'd have like, you took glucose here, waited 30 minutes, then it gets in the blood system and boom, all of it's right in there. If you look at a high molecular weight carbohydrate, it's like a minute or two after ingestion, it's starting to get into the blood system and it stays there, and it never spikes enough to really spike insulin. So you can take way more carbohydrates and without any of the issues. And then also you can add more sodium again because you're going to store more water with it.
It doesn't seem like you see it quite on the college level like you do the high school level, but cramping. How could you get yourself out of it? How could you prevent it by using some of what you just said?
Most people just need more sodium, because it's you sweat, you flush out sodium, and because like electrolytes they're just like a positive or negatively charged atom. That's really all they are. They conduct electricity, but that's how our muscles contract, and actually Troponin Nutrition, that's where my name comes from. When calcium, an electrolyte, enters into a muscle cell, it binds to troponin, which moves troponin off of tropomyosin, which allows a muscular contraction to happen. And so you need higher sodium. And that's one of the other problems with Gatorade, because the new formulations are lower in sodium. So what I do with filling out with people is, and with the protocol from the book that used half-strength Gatorade, now we use the high molecular weight carbohydrates. But in that approach, because diluting the Gatorade diluted the sodium even more. So what we do is we looked at high sodium concentration foods, and also a trick that I just posted on Instagram of baking soda. Baking soda is sodium bicarbonate, which is two benefits because Tums is calcium bicarbonate. So baking soda is an antacid. It calms your stomach. It's just rather than calcium bicarbonate, it's sodium bicarbonate. And the sodium is obviously sodium, and the bicarbonate is an antacid. So taking that in with the whole process increases the sodium concentration and also calms your stomach, which is helpful because anyone who's cut a lot of weight and tried to eat know, like, it's very easy to get an upset stomach, and then when you get an upset stomach and you especially upset stomach, you drink Gatorade, you're bloated, it can cause diarrhea, and there's no way you're going to eat a high sodium food at that point because you feel terrible. And so and then we also use high sodium foods, kind of just like a real crude approach is I use ramen noodles, because the seasoning for ramen is very high sodium. It's like 4 grams per packet or something. And you could put down 10 of those a day, that's 40 grams of sodium, which is more than you would ever need to fill out. It's so much so that really it no longer becomes a worry of, can I replenish myself after making weight? It becomes, can I overplenish and store too much water? Because if you're an endurance athlete or like an MMA or something, and you're too full, that's actually the worst thing you want, because when your muscles are too full, they get tight and you get almost like a compartment syndrome. The blood can't move in and out of the muscles very easily. And I talked about this in another podcast, but I'm pretty sure that's what happened to Shane Carwin this way back in 2008 when he fought Brock Lesnar and destroyed him in the first round, but gassed himself out. And they kept saying adrenaline dump, but he's had adrenaline dump. And I was like, no, I know what it is, because when he came out, the whole lead up they were talking about, he had to cut weight, make 265. And whether he did or he didn't, they did talk about using IVs and really filling out. And when you watched him come out in the ring, in the octagon, he had edema in his ankles. So he was so loaded with water that he was actually flushing water out of his blood system, out of his bloodstream under the skin. And what that does is it just compresses everything. So it's almost like wearing a tourniquet everywhere on your body. And so the lactate can't leave the muscle. And anyone who's been really bloated and tried to do a weight workout where they get lower back pumps, if you've ever had that, it's a common bodybuilding thing, like after a contest, because you gain weight really quickly and you can barely even train because the lower back pumps get so severe that lactate can't leave the area. And it's the worst lactic acid burn imaginable. And I'm pretty like that. To me, it's obvious that's what happened to him in that match. And so, like, yeah, so it's like the new methods have become so advanced, and the food sources are so advanced that now you can almost swing too far in that direction. It's not just fill out as much as you can, because you can actually fill out too much now.
All right. So you're always evaluating where your water and sodium level is. Yeah. Because nothing worse than getting in a match and have it not go your way because you overhydrated.
Yeah, and you can check simple things like you can, if you make a fist, and let your veins pop out, and then keep that fist held and raise your arm up. If you lose all your veins instantly, you need to fill out more. That's a real easy sign without doing any, like, you don't have to look at your urine color or anything. That means whatever fluid volume is in your vascular system is low enough that even when you're sending signals to send blood to that area, like they make you make a fist before get blood drawn or whatever, even when you're sending those signals, gravity still overpowers it and pulls the water down. And so that's a good. And then conversely, if you do that and you're holding your fist and you hold your arm up and your veins never go away, and you're gonna do some kind of running race or MMA or some endurance activity, you're too full at that point, and you're gonna run into real problems because you have to pump all that excess fluid, and that's what the circulatory system is. Your heart has to circulate all that excess fluid. You want the right amount. You don't want to be dehydrated because then you can't get the nutrients to the muscle, but you don't want to be so overhydrated that you're basically trying to filter 2 times as much fluid as you're supposed to filter, because the heart's got a lot of other stuff that's trying to do, oxygenating the body like an MMA fight.
Now we'll move into a little bit different of a direction. You own a supplement company. You deal with supplements all the time. Mm-hmm. As a young consumer of supplements, it's pretty easy to get confused on what you should take, what you shouldn't take. Some of it's needed, some of it's not needed. If you were going to assist a young athlete in knowing what supplements to take, what would you be looking at?
Oh man, it's so hard because as someone who used to be that young person who bought a bunch of garbage supplements, I refuse to produce things. The word supplement is what they are. They should supplement what you're doing. We don't have a protein powder. We will at some point a protein and a meal replacement, but I definitely didn't want to have it at first because I really wanted to insist that, protein powder is not better than real food. And in most cases, it's worse. In almost all cases, it's worse. It seems fancy because most people start working out and they've never taken a protein powder. And so then they assume it's a new thing. It must be good. Anything that tries to talk about changing hormone levels to any appreciable level, stay away from, probably, because the FDA doesn't allow. If it actually did raise hormones, they're going to ban it so they can sell it pharmaceutically. Don't buy into the pre-workout hype. We have a pre-workout, and I love our pre-workout, and it's a pretty high step pre-workout. But like the like Raging Death, Creeper Death Monkey, or whatever these things are called, where they just try to put as many illegal ingredients as they can. Yes, you'll be amped up, but how many crystal meth addicts do you know that are jacked? So you want something like with our product, we call it WTF because it hits hard. It's pretty high stim, but we do things we have a high amount of caffeine, teacrine, but we also add anxiolytics in there. Yeah, I mean, it's hard because there's so many things. Like I could go line by line for all our products. Like most products will use citrulline malate for a pump, and they'll argue that citrulline malate has a higher bioavailability, and it does. And more of the citrulline malate you take will get into the small intestine where it can get to the blood system than if you just take L-citrulline. However, citrulline malate is L-citrulline combined with a malic acid, and you can't absorb that. You have to cleave the malic acid and then absorb the L-citrulline. And when people take pre-workout, they don't take it an hour and a half before their workout. They take it before their workout. And so all that process is happening while you're training. You're cleaving the malic acid, then the L-citrulline is getting in the bloodstream, then it's getting where it needs to go to dilate the blood vessels and give you a better pump. But that might be an hour or an hour and a half after you take it when your workout's over. And so people that don't understand the science, manipulate people who also don't understand the science and argue the bioavailability, and why do they do that? Because you can use half the amount, because to real L-citrulline, to get the full benefit, you need like 10 grams of it, which is what we have, but that's expensive as hell. I could put 2 grams of citrulline malate, argue that it's more bioavailable. It won't get as much into your system as 10 grams of L-citrulline, and it won't happen until after the workout. But people who don't understand the science hear bioavailability and it sounds cool. And almost every supplement company, there's a couple good ones, but so many of them just kind of run on that. And so like your pre-workout, you need to understand those things. You don't need to. It sucks that you do need to, because it should be companies that put out good products, because it's not like a losing battle to put out a good product. Like you could still make money. Like for like $1 margin better per bottle, people are basically making garbage, which drives me crazy. And then what else how can we supplement the diet? Well, like an intra workout drink when you're not going to be eating food. I always prefer whole food, but you're not going to be eating a steak during training. And you supplying nutrients to the body while training is the most important if you want to make progress from the training. And so a good intra workout, and also that you don't find those anywhere either. Why? Because what's in a good intra workout? Well, we already talked about high molecular weight carbohydrates, but you can't just do that, because then you can run into dumping syndrome. And so you got to dilute it with a little bit of glucose also, and that's another expense. But that's not all you need, because to build muscle, you need the essential amino acids. And so what companies will do is they'll market branched chain amino acids. Why? Because you only have to supply 3 of them rather than 10. It's way cheaper, But branched chain, and then they'll argue that L-leucine is the specific trigger for mTOR to stimulate muscle protein synthesis, which is true. But muscle protein synthesis can only occur if all the essential amino acids are available. And so if you're only supplying BCAAs, just creating a stimulus that can't happen. And on top of that, BCAAs can be used as a direct source of energy. So I see people drinking BCAAs while doing cardio, and all they're basically drinking juice while doing cardio, like giving themselves a reason not to burn fat. They're giving a direct energy source. But why do the companies do that? Because there's 3 BCAAs and there's 10 essential amino acids, so 30% the cost. So like a real intra-workout, you want like 10 grams of essential amino acids, 20 per serving, 25 grams of carbohydrates, 20 grams of high molecular weight carbohydrate, and then you're also going to want maybe like L-taurine to help facilitate the pump, which is another expense. And then you're going to want to add electrolytes, sodium, potassium, another expense. And so, why would you do that if you know the consumer doesn't know anything, and you can put, just BCAAs in a product and call it intra-workout drink, and people don't know any better? And you can even argue, you can say, L-leucine is the trigger for muscle protein synthesis. Take this product, and you've used 3 amino acids versus all the other things that are needed. Or you can just do a high molecular weight carbohydrate. And that's what a lot of people do for 2 reasons. One, because amino acids taste like shit, and so it's really difficult to get the flavor down, which is more cost, because you can't just pump fruit punch flavor that every manufacturer on earth has in buckets of that flavor, and just mix it in. You actually have to work and get a flavor that will blunt the bitterness of the essential amino acids, or get instantized amino acids. And then the people aren't going to add the sodium. Why? For the same reason, because drinking salt water tastes gross. So you got to work through that also. And so it stinks that you have to advocate for yourself in these ways, but that some companies won't. But that's just kind of how the supplement industry always has been. But as someone who grew up in the sport, and because I have my coaching business and stuff, and we can't run a losing business. We can't run a business that loses money. But my goal with the first Detachment was to actually produce this. Well, my goal was, because I have all these clients that I couldn't recommend them. I had all these clients mixing all these products themselves. I had all my clients making their own intra-workout drink from separate ingredients, because I couldn't find anything out there, And so, and then what else? Health, there's like berberine can improve insulin sensitivity. That's been proven, research studies time and time again. And actually probably 1,500 milligrams of berberine per day when used properly seems to be about as effective as 1,000 milligrams of metformin, a prescription drug, at lowering blood sugar. And I'm super excited. It's so hard not to talk about it, but everyone talks about dihydroberberine now. And that's like where everyone's going with berberine, dihydroberberine, higher bioavailability. There's that keyword again, you know, and it does have a higher bioavailability. The problem is, though, when they do studies, even though it appears that the berberine is taken into the blood better and more available, the dihydroberberine, it does not improve blood sugars over berberine. It's again, the bioavailability is kind of like a fancy word that doesn't pan out. There is another thing you can do to berberine that I can't say because no one's doing it right now, and we're actually currently in the works to produce it. And no, we can't even source the materials for it. But it's I don't even say what it is. But there is something that you could add to berberine that makes it much more bioavailable. And studies, in multiple studies, show an improvement in blood glucose from like 20 to 22.5% better than berberine alone, which would arguably make it better than a prescription drug, metformin, which sucks because we've done all this work and all this money and all this research, and we're going to put out this product. And then if it actually does work better than metformin, it's probably not, it's going to get banned, you know, because Eli Lilly or Merck or Pfizer is going to say, hey, we want to produce that for $1,000 a bottle rather than $50 a bottle. But like a product like that, or products to help your kidney function, like astragalus, like our renal reset, or NAC or TUDCA for liver function, things that supplement the diet is what supplements should be. If you're trying to take something to replace the diet or mimic steroids from a legal supplement, it's not going to work.
How exciting is it to be on the verge of coming out with a product that nobody else is doing, that you're just right there on the threshold?
It's so hard not to talk about it because I want to tell everyone about it because I got all these studies, you know, and I want to tell, like, it's a very specific length chain of carbon, you know, like all these things that are like, it's because that doesn't I mean, when do new products come out like that actually work? You know, you had creatine, high molecular weight carbohydrates, you know, like there was the pro hormones and the pro steroids before they got banned, but it's pretty rare that a new novel product comes out that will like change things. And so it's very, very, very difficult. And I think we'll be able to have it produced around June. And I'm just hoping I can keep my mouth shut until then, because the problem is we're a new, smaller company. You know, our research is better than anyone's. I don't think there's anyone, you know, out there with, you know, I published 3 papers in experimental atomic physics. So I have like real peer-reviewed research experience. I don't think there's anyone out there doing that. So, but there are companies with a lot more money than us. And so the second it comes out, you know, I actually had an idea with a guy, Jason Kirker, for a product we were going to call Lean Seasons, a fat burning seasoning, you know, and it really wouldn't work, which is kind of why I didn't pursue it, because you couldn't put enough of it in a seasoning, you know, like you had, you know, like a seasoned salt type thing that had all these other fat burning ingredients. It would taste too bad in the amount you needed, but you could actually make it work. And Lean Season sounds good, but we didn't do it because we knew, like, the day McCormick saw it on the shelves, if it sold, they'd drown us out 2 days later, you know, like a major company like that. And actually a company did come out, Sensa, years later, like 8 years after the Lean Seasons idea, and they were producing a fat loss seasoning for women. I don't know what it panned out, but that's the worry, is like once this comes out, you know, it'll get copied, which is, I mean, that's awesome. Like a real, like, you know, that's flattering that it'll be copied. But I'm excited for the dual effect of everyone's going this dihydroberberine route. And it drives me crazy because I always joke with, like, some of my friends will say, like, you know, no one reads the research. You know, if you see someone arguing on Facebook or on Instagram and they'll post a link to a research study, at least half the time that research study debunks what the person's trying to argue. They just Google something really quick because no one reads it. Because reading research studies sucks. It's, you know, it's tedious. And so no one reads the research. And so that's what's happening with dihydroberberine. Everyone's talking about dihydroberberine, but no one's reading the studies, because if you read the studies, you'd say, like, you'd read past the higher bioavailability and realize that it doesn't improve blood sugars over berberine, you know. But so I'm excited for that also, that we'll get to say, hey, not only does ours work and here's the research to prove it, but yours doesn't work and here's the research to prove it. So.
All right. Now, I watched you on Mark Bell's podcast the other day, and you were explaining Einstein's theory of relativity, essentially, to him. So taking that a step further, while we're off the beaten path a little bit anyways, is time viewing possible using Einstein's theory?
we have a really bad anthropomorphic view because we only experience the universe in a weird state that's not true in much of the universe. We live in a state where gravitation is constant. That doesn't have to be that way. If anyone's taken physics, you learn the kinematic equations like x equals x naught plus vt plus 1/2 at squared. That tells you your position. The reason that's a Taylor expansion, an infinite Taylor expansion. The next unit after that is 1/6 uh, the time derivative of acceleration times t cubed. And in really, really high powered rockets, they have to account for that a little bit. But there's a fourth order and a fifth order and a sixth order. We just happen to live on Earth where there is a constant gravity, and it's pretty constant because it fades off. It fades like 1/r² as we get away from Earth. But we don't ever, the highest we're ever going to get is an airplane, which is still like to many, many decimal places constant. So we view the world through this way, to this world where we all see time the same way. But the only reason we see time the same way is because we're all moving at the same rate. That time, like, it's so dumb. I always like kind of wanted to go back and see if there's a way I could reformulate the basic kinematics and make a universal kinematic where we remove velocity, because velocity is only different than position if you have something to compare it to. And because like right now, my position is at my desk, but I'm traveling at 30 kilometers per second through space on Earth. So I'm not at rest. I'm not at a position. I'm only at a position because you and I are both on the same rock. If you were on a different planet, we would see each other as moving at a velocity, not at a position. And so we already have this weird thing where it's like redundant, where we have position and then velocity. But that velocity only means anything if we're comparing it to something else. And a way to, and I was trying to explain it on Mark Bell's podcast, but like you can imagine like driving in your car and tossing a tennis ball up in the air, right? Or on a plane, it's going to go right up and down for you, right? Because I'm just sitting here. But if someone sees that plane flying by, that ball's not going up and down. That ball is going, And why is that important? Because light only has one speed. And so, so if you did that with light, like say we had a light that flashed photons off a light plate or a mirror, and it bounced back up, and every 1,000 times was 1 second or whatever. Well, we were sitting there, and now we're traveling through space really, really fast, and this is our time. Now, say you're watching me traveling through space, and you see me traveling really fast this way. Well, now you see that light particle going, and so now it doesn't travel this far. It travels all this distance. But what's effed up? Light only has one speed. So it can't take a different amount of time to do that. So the only way that can happen is that for you, the time dilated compared to me. So, and that is what happens. And that's what's really effed up, because you could put atomic clocks on airplanes and have them fly to London and back. It'll be different than a clock that stayed in New York. And everything happens. All the processes in your bodies happen differently because we're all made up of photons. And so really, it's almost like we're probably doing things just completely wrong, because the only thing that is constant in the universe is the speed of light. And so you could probably argue that should be our rest. That should be, zero. That should be no motion. And everything moves in relation to that. And then when that would happen, time would be a totally different thing, because you'd realize that time only meant anything to anyone in relation to how fast they were traveling compared to other people. And what's that movie, Inception? Or no, not with Matthew McConaughey. That's a good movie, and they don't violate physics in it. But like the one planet where like 1 minute was like 2 hours or whatever. So other things that affect how photons would travel through space will also affect time. So a very, very high gravitational planet would have changed time. It would be like that, where you go there, and to the person on the planet, let's say it's 1,000 times the gravity of Earth, you're there for an hour, but on Earth, 1,000 hours passed. And so, it was only an hour for you because that was how long you were there. But when you go back to someone in comparison who had, photons at different speeds and things like that, all these things happen in that same time frame, and it's all bound because light can only have one speed. And so if I see light travel this distance and you see light travel all that distance, the only way that can happen is if our times are different, which means, so we're really there. And there's a lot of really interesting things, like when they try to do like aliens, like almost so much of how everything in our life is because of the force of gravity on Earth. When you all walking is falling. That's how we walk. You fall forward and catch, and then fall forward and catch. So how fast does that happen? It's linked to gravity, because like watch the people on the moon landing. And if you don't believe that, just like imagine if you fell at half the speed while you walk, you wouldn't be able to run as fast. And so you can imagine like what if an alien civilization came of a very, very heavy planet? They would run so fast. They'd be running like thousands of miles an hour, and their bodies would have adapted to that. Because even more so, you can imagine like our brains have probably developed in relation to that. Because if I see a flower, or I see a potential threat, like the how quickly the nervous system transmits that information is related to how fast I can get there or get away from it, or it can get to me, which is also linked to gravity. So there's no need to have like incredibly rapid nervous system processes. But the same thing, if you were on an incredibly high density planet with incredibly high gravity and a threat was there, you would need to react 1,000 times faster. So your thought process would be 1,000 times faster. And you can imagine how that would change everything you think about everything. And so we try to like view we can't understand it. And like, it almost like stresses me out, like to really think about it. There's a really, it's old now. It's like 15 years old, and they're going to have better ones with the Webb telescope. But it's called The Most Important Image Ever Taken. It's a video on YouTube. I suggest everyone watch it if they can actually sit down for like 6 or 7 minutes and really understand it. But the Hubble Space Telescope stared at an empty space of sky. So there's like the size of a pinhead. Like you hold a pinhead at arm's length, that spot in space, a speck there where nothing is there, no stars or anything. They had the Hubble Space Telescope stare at that empty speck for 11 days, and when they developed it, there were over 10,000 galaxies. Each of those galaxies with hundreds of billions of stars in that tiny speck. And so like us trying to understand the universe is so absurd, because like there's more, the saying, there's more there's more stars in our galaxy than there are grains of sand on Earth, or whatever. Like go to a beach, there's like a few billion grains of sand there. There's 400 billion grains of sand. Is it billion? Yeah, 400 billion grains, or 400 billion stars just in our galaxy. And there might be 1 trillion galaxies in the known universe, which is very likely a small fraction of the total universe, which currently mathematically appears to be possibly only one of many, many universes. So, you can imagine like a human living on one of those grains of sand on some beach, and, like, because what their lifespan would be, like a millisecond, and everything that happens in their life, they fall in love, they get married, they worry about the universe, worry about time travel, and how insignificant that is, and how they could never understand even what's going on on Earth, which would be like the galaxy. And we know that Earth is just one planet in our solar system, in our galaxy, which is one of potentially trillions of galaxies. And so it's numbers that the human brain can't even comprehend. I mean, at all. We can't comprehend. Sometimes if you maybe take an edible or something, you think about it, you can get a little close to it, but it's like, so us trying to really understand that, it's one, we can't understand it. And so like, that's why there's mathematics, because mathematics always works, always, because it's the only logical foundation for explaining anything that we have. Words are terrible. There's like 250,000 words in the English language. And you think you could talk to your wife and get misheard all the time, or misinterpret what you say. So we're trying to explain things. It's just so crude, but math always works. And so that's really all you can do to understand the universe. But that's even more troubling because people don't learn math. And so the window to understanding the universe is only open to a very small fraction of people. And like, I mean, some of the stuff, I remember my mathematical physics class, we were learning about complex analysis, which is calculus with imaginary numbers. And imaginary numbers aren't imaginary. It's just like there's numbers that don't work properly. There's natural numbers like 1, 2, 3, 4. There's real numbers which are negative, whatever, to negative or positive, whatever. There's there's the real numbers. And then there's things like imaginary numbers, like the square root of -1. There is no, you can't do that, because -1 squared is 1. So it can't, the negative means nothing because it gets, when you square it, it goes away. But there is really amazing mathematics that comes out of the use of the square root of -1. It's called I. And so much so that you can do a unifying theory of geometry and trigonometry with I. So cosine and sine, e to the I, like cosine theta, e to the I theta is cosine plus I sine theta. And so then cosine is then 1/2 e to the I theta plus e to the negative I theta, and sine is 1/2 e to the I theta minus e to the negative I theta. And but that's even more crazy because then when you have e to the I theta, and why is that interesting? Because that e can be expanded out in a Taylor expansion, like we talked about the kinematic equations, and you can solve so many systems of equations, so many solutions for classical mechanics and quantum mechanics by taking an exponential operator, say e to the derivative with respect to time, and you operate that on x, on position, and if you operate that and you take the derivative with the Taylor expansion, you get the exact kinematic equations. But even crazier, if you add an I to that, you get the kinematic equations of rotational motion, which makes sense because cosine theta, like rotation. So right away, it's like all over again. This I pops in, and now it's unified everything. So I'm kind of really off on a tangent, but no one learns these things. And like I was saying, like this, like we were doing, because you learn, like, it's called the calculus of residues. You find a residue and with imaginary numbers. And why that's important is because you have the real number line, and then the imaginary numbers doubly cross it. So you can have a positive negative version of the imaginary number that crosses the real line at an actual real value, and that gives you real world, like classical, like things I experience values using numbers that don't exist. You get a double crossing of it. And he would say, like, because it'd be hard, and he was a Chinese professor, and he'd say, how many people in Michigan you think can do this? I think only you and I, like kind of like joking, but it's true. Like there were so many like amazing things that I learned that I just will never be able to talk to anyone because I'm out of physics now, and like when you see things on the internet, like flat earth stuff or the moon landing, and because people are using words to describe things that words don't describe, that you can, like whether or not the earth is round, like even outside of like the experiments and stuff, you can calculate all the trajectories of earth through space by using the 1/r² force rule, or the 1/r potential rule, which works for spherical objects, and so like it's like, but no one knows that because people don't learn math. Even more so, like Paul Dirac, a really cool physicist. He's famous for the Dirac, for everything, quantum electrodynamics. But the positron, like antimatter, came out of just mathematics. It was him trying to do field equations for quantum mechanics, and then field equations, because most systems of equations have double solutions. Almost everything in the real world is like a second order differential equation with two solutions, and one of them is almost always garbage, and it's obvious which one's garbage. But what seems weird, because it gives me two solutions. One of them always works on Earth in the world, and one of them doesn't. Why is it there? But in those same equations, when you put field equations to quantum mechanics, you get the opposite of things. So you get the opposite of an electron, which is an anti-electron, or a positron, which like was so absurd at the time because like everyone just thought it had to be like a like one of those like throwaway solutions or whatever. But later on, what happens? We find out that antimatter exists, and that happens over and over and over again. The mathematics, if it always works, and if the mathematics says it's true, it just means that at some point we'll be able to do experiments to prove it. But the math is always right. And to go off on a real tangent, then when people talk about like simulation theory and stuff, which I just think it's interesting because who knows what with anything. But I think it's very interesting. Like we have AI coming out now, Chat GPT. Tesla's AI is amazing. I have a Tesla, full self-driving. It drives me like it's amazing, But so within the next 100 years, we'll develop computer systems where like we could create a Sims game where the people in the game will not understand that they're a simulation. They'll believe they're real. Within 100 years is a long time. 100 years ago, we didn't even have computers. So in the next 100 years, that's going to happen. Now, it's a big universe. We talked how big the universe is, how old it is, 14 billion years. So either we just happen to live in the one place on this massive universe over 15 billion years where that within a 100-year window where that happened for the very first time. I mean, think about when in all the universe, this is the only time this has happened. We just happen to be so privileged to exist in this time that we create a simulation where the people in the simulation don't understand that they're simulation, or much more likely is that's happened many times over billions of years in the enormity of the universe, and we are one of them. And then where we would write the simulation with code like neural networks, maybe in C++ or Python, our language would be written in mathematics. That was the code of our simulation, and that could be why it always works, because the math always works. I mean, always. Like there's it just always works. That's the experiment is experimental physics is there to prove once again that the math worked. But like the Higgs boson, you guys like CERN, the particle accelerator that everyone was worried was going to create a black hole and engulf the Earth like 10 years ago. The Higgs boson came out in the mathematics 70 years ago, And so like people like you read newspaper clippings, like, are they going to find the Higgs boson, the God particle, yada yada? Because what the Higgs boson does is gives mass to things. So why don't we travel at the speed of light? And we don't, because we have mass. And anything that doesn't have mass, like a photon, can only travel at the speed of light, and that's all it does. Anything with mass can never travel at the speed of light, because the equations show to get to a velocity at the speed of light would take an infinite amount of energy. So it can't happen. So what does the Higgs boson do? The Higgs boson decides who has mass. And so you can kind of think of a way to think about, and would bodybuilding, like powerlifting would be your audience probably more? Or?
Yeah, powerlifting, athletes, stuff like that.
Higgs boson would be like if my wife walked in through a powerlifting meet, she would be a photon. She would be able to walk freely. If Ed Cohen walked into a powerlifting meet, he can't, because every person would stop him and say hi to him, and that's what the Higgs boson does. And and so like the newspaper clippings would talk about, are they going to find it? Well, like, does it really exist, the God particle? It's like, yes, because the math showed it, and now it just takes 70 years for the experiments to get good enough to prove it. But the math always works, and we all make jokes about how dumb math is.
That was one of the most amazing conversations I have ever been a part of. I can't say I understood very much of it, but just to listen to somebody talk about it was incredible. So I'm glad I took you off topic on that.
I appreciate it, because I love nutrition, but like, I would love to get to talk about physics and stuff more. So I appreciate it.
Well, no problem. I know you're busy, so I'll kind of wrap up with this last question, because it was something that I was wondering about. So I have your comprehensive nutrition 1 and 2 in a hardback book. Cool. And then looking on your website, you have, some really nice ebooks that I would like to have, but there's just something about a book for me. I can write in, I can highlight everything about a book. Is there
I'm the same.
Any plans in the future?
No, there's no money in it. It sucks because when ebooks first started coming out, I'm the same as you. I was like, I don't want an ebook. I hate that. I want to be able to flip pages, bookmark. I don't have to scroll through a PDF. But you and I are the rarity, because the hard copy versions, they're available. Elite FTS sells it. You can go to Lulu. If you Google online, you can buy it on Amazon. They don't sell. The ebooks sell like crazy. So it's just, because it costs money to publish them. Because I guess it doesn't have to. You could do like an on-demand publisher or something, but then you're making like $1.50 a book, where ebooks it's 100% margin, or you publish, in chunks of 1,000 and sell them, which you spend $7,000 to get 1,000 of them produced, and it'd take a decade to sell them all, because everyone just wants the ebooks. I hate it, but it's a money thing.
The economy of it makes sense. I can't fault you for that. It was just a question I'd had, because I'd I was looking at a few different ones, and I'm like, man, that'd be really nice just to have where you could take anywhere, write in it, whatever you wanted to do. But I
Well,
definitely get it.
the ones that I would potentially, because I really prefer them, but I mean, like critical mass or power bodybuilding or massive or shredded, those are just training programs or diet plans. Like massive and shredded is an Excel spreadsheet with an algorithm that you put in your height, weight, and estimated body fat, and it outputs a whole diet for you, macros and full meal plan, and then you can change your numbers as often as you like. Every week you enter your new estimated body fat and your new weight. It'll output a whole new diet if you've changed enough. If you haven't changed enough to need a new diet, it won't change the values. And I have a video up on my YouTube kind of showing that. So that can't really work as an ebook. But we have the protein book that Thomas just wrote is awesome. And then the metabolic meltdown book is awesome too. And I would love to do those I probably will just like as a passion project and just accept that I'm not going to make money on it. But because I don't know how people do the ebooks. I don't get anything out of it. I have to flip back and forth. I need to touch something. And because I don't read like linearly either. I read. Oh, that's referencing. What was that? And I have to go back. Scrolling through a PDF and finding it is where I can like tab it or put a little thing in there or circle it on the page. And then I can just scroll through and find it really quick. But that's how I read a book. I got, like my both hands on it, like all these pages bookmarked, and I'm going back and forth because I can't read. Like some people just process information. Mine comes in chunks, and I got to go back and forth. And I'll read one section that I knew was really good. I'll reference it. Like I'll read 2 more pages, then go back and realize I didn't understand those 2 pages, and then reference it again, and then reread the 2 pages. And yeah, but so maybe those 2 books will come out in a hard copy. They'll be on Amazon, and they'll sit there. No one will buy them.
Well, I'm sure some people will. There's enough people interested in it. Now, they may not be Amazon bestsellers, but the people that want the information, they'll find it.
Yeah, actually, Amazon, because I'm on the Kindle KDP or whatever Kindle publishing thing. It's not expensive. That's actually a good idea. I should get those out there because I would want them as a hard copy. I think you talked me into it.
Well, I hope I did because I would be looking at purchasing them. I was going to have to probably get them as an ebook, but if you're going to do this, I'll just wait on you.
Yeah, it's the time thing. But I have like a team now, so I can get someone on doing the dirty work. I mean, it's just dealing with like Amazon, like because you'll upload a file and it won't meet their criteria, and you got to resize things and all that. I love technology, but I hate it. So it's always like our products are on Walmart now on Walmart.com. They're not quite in stores yet, but the amount of work just to get your freaking products on Amazon is. We had like a dedicated employee who spent weeks all day long just jumping through the hoops to, it's like, because it's all like dumb, anything with technology, you fill out these forms and then you check box 3A/B when you should have checked box 3A/C. And now a Walmart care representative is going to go back and review things and see what other information. Now you got to send like all this new information to have to be allowed to go back and remove 3A checkbox C and replace it with, it's like, come on.
I enjoyed hearing about the business side of it. I mean, I think writing a book would be incredible, but then listen to you talk. Yeah. The only reason why you're really going to write a book as a hard book is more of a legacy thing, I guess, than anything.
Yeah.
If the computers would go down.
Yeah, they will at some point too. That's funny. They'll go down. But yeah, I have no ebooks. I have a whole bookshelf. You can't see it. And I have a whole closet full. I love reading. I don't buy ebooks. I mean, I can't read them. They don't work. I'll read stuff on the internet all day, but if it's a short article, yes. If it's a 200-page book, I don't get it because I'm reading that in my bed or in a chair, or I need to copy or highlight or bookmark things. I can't. Yeah.
I totally understand. Well, I know how incredibly busy you are, and I really appreciate you taking a chance on coming on a small podcast. That this is a highlight for me. So
I appreciate it. No, it was awesome. I got to talk about physics. I like it.
Anytime you want to talk about physics, you let me know. I won't understand any of it, but we'll set it up. So,
I'll come back on. You want to talk about physics or business? Those are my 2 passions now. I mean, nutrition, I don't remember a time I didn't know about nutrition. It's been 25 years to where that's all I did all day long, other than like when I went back to grad school. So it's like, other than when crap's going on in the background and I can't hear what you're saying, I can do it in my sleep. But I would love to talk about business. I think, especially in this sport, there's so much money to be made in it. Like it's crazy because like the influencers figured it out. You got all these people, like chicks showing their butts and guys doing dumb shit in the gym and making millions. And you got all these bodybuilders working their butt off. And like I love the business side of it. It's a many, many, many $billion industry, and I wish more of us got a piece of that pie, and especially more than some of the influencers that are getting it now.
Well, I'll have to hit you up one of these days when I have some questions, and then get your opinion on a few things.
I'm game. Yeah, I wanted to do a business podcast, but like the time, I don't have the time. But I would definitely come on and talk about it.
Well, thank you very much. I may have to hold you to that one of these days. I know you got a busy night, so I'll let you get off here. But I think the information you threw down is very informative, and hopefully help some kids get on the right path.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks.
And apologies for the mustache. I'm trying to annoy my kids.
You got to try different things to make them.
It's so bad. I keep seeing myself. Yeah, I keep seeing myself on the camera. It's like, oh God, it's so hideous, but it's worth it because they hate it. So.
Well, if you didn't do stuff like that, would you even be their dad?
No, I think you lose your privileges. Yeah, you lose your dad card. So I'm a proud carrying member.
All right, man. Well, we can end with that. So have a wonderful night.
All right, thanks.